Hello everyone, welcome to today's session. When we talk about global security, we often think of powerful nations exercising their vetoes in the UN headquarters or massive military alliances. But there is a quieter, more profound form of global engagement, one that takes place on the ground by the UN blue helmets. So today we are exploring India's role in United Nations peacekeeping. When I look at the map of global conflict today, we see a world in flux. Amidst all this, volatility, there is a constant that is the presence of the blue helmets. For over 7 decades, Indian soldiers, police officers, and civilian experts have been the backbone of these international efforts. Now, to understand what is UN peacekeeping, UN peacekeeping is a term which is not explicitly mentioned in the UN Charter. Instead, it emerges pragmatically during the Cold War as a mechanism to manage conflicts without triggering great power confrontations. Peacekeeping is often described as operating under the Chapter 6 and a half of the UN Charter, which is a very important part of today's lecture. We will explore about it later in the slides. It is also positioned between peaceful settlement of disputes in Chapter 6 and enforcement action under Chapter 7. At its core, UN peacekeeping rests on the three foundational principles. These are consent of the parties, impartiality, and most importantly, the non-use of force except in self-defense and defense of the mandate. This principle distinguishes peacekeeping from peace enforcement and military intervention. Over time, however, peacekeeping mandates have expanded to include other things like civilian protection, disarmament, election support, institutional building, and human rights monitoring. Coming to the next part, the evolution from traditional to multidimensional peacekeeping. Early peacekeeping missions such as in the Middle East in the 1950s were limited in the scope. They involved unarmed or lightly armed troops, and those were monitoring ceasefires between the states that were in flux. Since the end of the Cold War, peacekeeping has increasingly addressed interstate conflicts, civil wars, and state collapse. This shift has required peacekeepers to operate in complex political and social environment, often without clear peace agreements. India's role has evolved alongside this transformation. While initially it was focused on the traditional military observer roles, Indian contingents now participate in complex missions involving counterinsurgency like conditions, civilian protection, and it also coordinate with the humanitarian agencies. This evolution has posed both opportunities and challenges for India's peacekeeping engagements. For coming to the next, for India, peacekeeping is not just a diplomatic obligation. It is also the extension of our powerful civilization, from the Ashoka's edicts of non-violence to the Gandhian principle of Satyagraha. India's approach to the world has been defined by the phrase that is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the world is one family. As we stand here in 2026, India remains one of the largest contributor in UN peacekeeping force. Over 2,90,000 Indian personnel have served under the blue helmet in more than 50 missions. But why does a country with its own complex security challenges send its finest men and women in uniform thousands of miles away? In this lecture, we will explore the historical evolution of India's participation, the Indian way of peacekeeping, professionalism, and soft power. Then the pioneering role of Indian women in the field, and also the strategic link between peacekeeping and India's claim for a permanent seat at the UNSC. A historical journey from Korea to the present time, which is basically defining the historical timeline, India's journey with the UN began even before our own independence. As a founding member of the United Nations in 45, India viewed the organization as a guarantor of a just world order. Our first major contribution came in 1950 during the Korean War. India did not send combat troops. Instead, we sent the 60th Parafield Ambulance. This unit provided the medical cover to both UN troops and civilians, earning a reputation for neutrality and compassion. Then came the Congo in 1960. This was a turning point. It was the first time that India deployed a full brigade for a peace enforcement mission. It was dangerous and complex, but it proved that Indian soldiers could operate in highly volatile political environment while maintaining a strict discipline. Since then, the Indian flag has flown in West Asia, where we helped the supervise the withdrawal of colonial forces from Suez, obviously in Cambodia and Rwanda, where our troops managed the transition from genocide and civil war towards democracy. West Africa, Liberia and Sierra Leone, where Indian peacekeepers became the backbone of stability during some of the continent's darkest hours. Today, nearly 80% of Indian peacekeepers are deployed in Africa. This is not a coincidence. This reflects that India's commitment to the global south, a term which is basically used for developing nations that share similar colonial histories and development aspirations. Coming to next, that what is the normative and ideational driver of the India's peacekeeping policy. India's peacekeeping policy cannot be separated from its commitment to non-alignment during the Cold War. As a leader of the non-alignment movement, India sought to maintain independence from both US and Soviet bloc while promoting collective security through UN. Peacekeeping allowed India to demonstrate international responsibility without becoming entangled in alliance politics. By contributing troops under UN command, India could participate in global security governance while also preserving the strategic autonomy. This logic continues to influence India's peacekeeping stance even in the post-Cold War era. Coming to the moral politics side, uh, peace, justice and international responsibility, India's leaders at that time viewed international politics through a moral lens that emphasized on three factors, that is peace, justice and cooperation. Peacekeeping was seen as a practical extension of these values. India's willingness to deploy troops in distant conflict was justified not by the material gain but by a sense of moral obligation to uphold international peace. This moral framing has been repeatedly invoked in official statements and military doctrine. Indian peacekeepers are often described as soldiers of peace, reflecting an emphasis on restraint, discipline, and engagement with local population. India's military ethos in peacekeeping operations, Indian peacekeepers are widely recognized for their professionalism, discipline, and their ability to operate in culturally diverse settings. Then pre-deployment training emphasizes not only military readiness but also cultural sensitivity, human rights and rules of engagement. India's long experience with internal security challenges and counter-insurgency operations has equipped its troops with skills relevant to modern peacekeeping environments. However, India has consistently emphasized that the peacekeeping is not counter-insurgency and must remain distinct in its objectives and methods. When it's coming to the engagement with local local communities, one of the distinguishing features of the Indian peacekeepers has been its emphasis on the community engagement. Indian contingents, wherever they are posted, they often undertake medical camps, infrastructure projects, and educational initiatives fostering goodwill among the local population. This approach reflects a broader understanding that sustainable peace cannot be achieved through military presence alone, but by building trust and addressing humanitarian needs. Indian peacekeepers also contribute to social foundations of peace. How we are contributing to UN peacekeeping through soft power, what makes an Indian peacekeeper different. Indian military circles, we call it the no national caveats policy. Unlike many other nations that place strict conditions on where and how their troops can be used, India gives the UN force commander full operational flexibility, but beyond the hard power of the military. Uh, India excels at soft power peacekeeping. If you visit an Indian battalion in UNMISS, that is India's mission in South Sudan, or MONUSMO, that is in Congo, you won't just see soldiers with rifles. You will also see, veterinary camp like Indian Army vets treating the livestock of the local farmer. In many conflict zones, a cow is a family's entire bank account. By saving the livestock, we save the livelihood of the local population. Also coming to the local outreach, a level 2 and level 3 hospitals are often the only high quality healthcare available in a conflict zone to the thousands of civilians. Coming to promoting other culture and yoga, on June 21st, as we know, is a World Yoga Day. Every year, you'll see that blue helmet soldiers and local citizens are practicing yoga together. It's a tool for stress relief and obviously to bridge the cultural communication. This human touch is why Indian troops are often the most welcomed by host populations. We don't just keep the pace, but we build the community. Coming to the next part, that is what is Indian women's contribution in peacekeeping. Now let's talk about the revolutionary shift in peacekeeping, the gender dimension. In 2007, India made history by deploying the first ever all-female uniformed police unit, that is FPU, to Liberia. At a time when the country was recovering from a brutal civil war, these Indian women became the role models. They inspired Liberian women to join their own police force, which saw a 300% increase in female recruitment after the Indian unit arrived. Now, why this is important? In conflict zones, women and children are unfortunately the most vulnerable one, and obviously the one who are most hit by the conflict or affected by the conflict. A female survivor of violence is far more likely to approach a female peacekeeper to report a crime or seek help. In recent years, we have seen that individual Indian officers reach the pinnacle of global recognition, whether it's Major Suman Gawani and Major Radhika Sen in 2024. They received the UN Military Gender Advocate of the Year award. Major Radhika Sen, she served in the DOC. She was praised for creating community alert networks, which is a safe space for women to voice their security concern. Today, India is committed to the UN's uniformed gender parity strategy. We are not just checking a box, we are proving that the peace is more sustainable when it is inclusive. Coming to the human and strategic cost of these things or the challenges we face, that this commitment, however, comes at a very heavy cost. India holds a somber record. We have lost more peacekeepers than any other nation. Over 180 Indian bravoes has made the supreme sacrifice under the UN flag. This, also bring us to a critical debate in Indian foreign policy. As a student of this subject, you must ask that why does India continue to contribute so much when it does not have a permanent seat on the UN Security Council, which is a very pertinent and important question these days. This is a growing sense of frustration in New Delhi. We were once doing the heavy lifting on the ground, yet the mandates, the rules of the engagement are written by a few members in the new world. India's argument is simple. A nation that provides the muscle and blood for global peace must also have the voice in global decision making. Our peacekeeping record is our strongest credential for a permanent seat in our reformed UNSC. Furthermore, we are now modernizing under the Viksit Bharat vision. India is moving to being from a mere troop contributor to a technology provider. We are advocating for the use of drones and surveillance technology to protect the peacekeepers. The search initiative for better medical evacuation also enable accountability for crimes that is committed against peacekeepers. Coming to the next portion, that is legal and ethical challenges in peacekeeping, and also use of force, impartiality and consent. One of the central debate in contemporary peacekeeping that concerns is the balance between impartiality and the use of force. Robust mandates authorize peacekeepers to use force to protect civilians and ensure mandate implementation. However, excessive and poorly defined use of force risks undermining impartiality and host state consent. India has been cautious in this regard, drawing on the experience in Congo and South Sudan. India has argued that peacekeepers must not, become parties to conflict. It has emphasized that the peacekeeping legitimacy derived from the consent and political neutrality, but not military dominance. Coming to accountability and the conduct of peacekeepers, incidents involving misconduct by peacekeepers has posed serious challenges to the credibility of human missions. India has adopted a strict policy of zero tolerance towards such misconduct, has also emphasized the responsibility of our troop contributing countries to ensure accountability. India's contingents are subject to rigorous pre-deployment training and disciplinary standards. India has also supported greater transparency and cooperation between UN and national authorities in investigating allegations. Let's look at the future, what are the modernization or the reforms that can be suggested. India's visions for the future of peacekeeping is grounded in several key principles. These are primacy of politics, respect for sovereignty, then shared responsibility between the UN and member states, and also enhancing the voice for troop contributing countries. India advocated for capacity building in host states, regional partnership, preventing diplomacy, and compounded preventive diplomacy, and also complements to peacekeeping missions and peace contributing countries. It emphasized that peacekeeping should support, not replace, national ownership of peace process, which is a very pertinent and important point to be noted here. Also, coming to the peacekeeping in a multidimensional world, as the international system becomes more multipolar, peacekeeping will increasingly reflect geopolitical competition and complexities. India has positioned itself as a stabilizing force that supports and multinationalism and also resists the politicization of UN missions, which is again a very important point to note. India's continued commitment to peacekeeping enhances its diplomatic credibility, strengthens its relations with the global south, and reinforces its identity as a responsible global actor. In conclusion, here what we can see, the future of blue helmet. India's role in UN peacekeeping serves as a masterclass in the synergy between idealism and realism. On one hand, India's commitment is deeply idealistic, rooted in Gandhian philosophy of nonviolence and a state-first belief in multilateralism, peaceful world order. On the other hand, this engagement is a strategic masterstroke of realism by consistently providing the boots on the ground. India projects itself not merely as a balancing power that reacts to global shift, but as a leading power capable of shaping international security norms. As you study this topic, remember that the peacekeeping is evolving. It is no longer just about standing between two armies. It is about protecting human rights, managing climate-induced conflicts, and using technology for good. India has proven that it has the heart to serve and the strength to lead. The question for the next generation is how to ensure that this sacrifice leads to a more democratic and representative United Nations. Thank you for your attention to this lecture.